All right, it is 6:30, so we might as well get started. Diane, did you want a roll call council?
Yes, sir. Kramer, Greg,
Present.
Alter,
Here.
Hernkane,
Here.
Lewis,
Present.
Littman,
Here.
Lombardi,
Here.
Starrett,
Here.
and Barrett.
Here.
8 present.
Thank you. I will say that we have on the call, we have President Claudette Eisnick on the call. We have Jason Popeil, Justin Richard, Samantha Walters. I believe I saw Bill Bartos in there, Barb Sylvester. We also have the mayor present, Debbie Bonk, Dave Maley, and Jane Ferrero. I don't think I missed anyone.
Lori Katagides, did I hear her say she was on?
Yes, you did, Diane.
Okay.
Thank
Thank
you.
All right. Before we get started, I did want to give President Eisnick an opportunity to speak to any matters that she may have been working on, so that way we can knock that out right away. So with that, President Eisnick, you have the floor.
Thank you. I talked to Justin Richard today, and asked him about getting back into chambers, and he gave me a couple of guidelines. I don't think we're going to rush into it for Monday, but my goal is to have it the following Monday. Councilman Lombardi, do you have anything to add to that?
Until we make a decision, it's going to take Bob Jones about 2 weeks lead time to get the one piece of equipment we need to hook the council into WebEx. However, in the meantime, Anita Combs has emailed me and told me that we don't have Wi-Fi available in that building. So I'm trying to figure out how to get Wi-Fi in over there so that the computer that we use can hook to the internet. And I'd asked if there were any other options. I haven't gotten an answer back yet on that.
I thought we had talked about getting Wi-Fi in there months ago.
That I don't know. All I know is Anita said that there is no Wi-Fi available. That's the only thing that was available was the Massillon cable free Wi-Fi. And I thought that was just on the outside perimeter of the building. I didn't think that was on the inside. What I could do is take my own laptop down there and test it and see if that is available inside chambers.
Okay. Thank you.
Madam President?
Yes.
Mr. Eisnick, this is Jane Ferrero. Hey, you guys can use money from the COVID account to access anything that you need. So if you need to go on, Mr. Lombardi, if you need to find money to put into that fund, we have it for you.
Thank you. Does anyone know how we'd go about getting Wi-Fi in there?
Yeah, I can.
Madam President,
Go ahead.
this is Justin Richard. There is Wi-Fi in there. I'm out one door away, and on my phone it says Massillon Council or something to that effect, and it's a full signal. I know that Judge Elam has also put Wi-Fi next door, so I'm actually using the Wi-Fi from my office as well. So I just need to get the password. I can probably get that from court personnel, and I could probably help get on, whomever needs to get on once we get computers in.
Thank you, Mr. Richard.
Okay, well,
That would be great.
Claudette, if that's the case, then I'm looking at the email from Anita, and she said she spoke with BPI, and she's not aware of any Wi-Fi besides the free MCTV Wi-Fi in the court area. So I can go down and try it, make sure that we've got it. Well, if Justin's actually on it, then it's there. So that won't be an issue. So it's
Well, I'm
just,
actually on my own. Judge Elam actually set up several different addresses, different ports, and one of the routers is in my office, and it's on its own. It's Massillon Municipal Court 2. There's another one that's MMC 1, and there's one that says Massillon Council. So, and I believe that the beacon is somewhere within council chambers.
okay, I'll take my laptop down there tomorrow and test that out and make sure that the Wi-Fi is active and able to get on. And then, like I say, once we make the decision, Bob needs about 2 weeks lead time to get the one piece of equipment in that he needs to hook the sound system into the computer.
Thank you. That's,
Madam President.
go ahead.
I was just going to say that I think whatever date it is that we start, it should be a work session. That way, if there are any obstacles or anything, it's a work session that's being disrupted as compared to a roll called meeting with votes.
So you're looking competent instead of me?
What's that?
I said, you're looking competent instead of me.
Yeah, exactly.
I can live with that.
I believe Ms. Littman had something to say as well.
Go ahead.
Well, thank you, Madam President. I was just wanting to confirm if we are looking at 2 weeks from today for the music shop to get in, or Bob Jones to get in that piece of equipment, that is already the 10th. So I'm assuming he will need some time thereafter for installation. So we may want to proceed on the 17th versus on the 10th.
Linda, you are really breaking up badly on my end.
Oh, I'm suggesting that if Bob Jones needs 2 weeks, 2 weeks from today is the 10th. If we are giving him some installation time, we may want to suggest coming back to council chambers on the 17th.
Isn't the 17th a council meeting?
We might even want to go 1 week further, just so we can do some testing and make sure everything's up and running correctly.
We have 5
Okay.
weeks. Madam President, we have 5 Mondays in August. So which one are we off?
The 4th one.
That's the 24th.
We always have council the 1st and 3rd and the 2nd and last.
Okay, then the 24th is the one that,
Did you hear me?
Said wait till the next, that would be. Yes, if Mr. Lombardi said wait till the next Monday, that would be the 24th, which we would be off. So we would need to then move to the 31st. Madam President, are you able to hear me now?
You're breaking up really bad. Am I the only one having that?
Yeah, I can hear it clearly.
Okay, I don't know. Okay, go ahead.
No, that's all I wanted to confirm. Exactly what date would we be looking at going back to council chambers? If Bob Jones needs 2 weeks, we'd be looking at the 10th before that piece of equipment would come in. If we're waiting for a work session, we need to wait to the 31st.
What are you thinking, Councilman Lewis?
I'm fine with the 31st. I like the idea of a work session just because I think it's less disruptive to the business of the city if we have a test run before the actual voting sessions.
Agreed. So the 31st then?
We can have that as a goal.
Yeah, I was
The
gonna
10th
say,
might be rushing it.
Claudette, I was gonna suggest maybe we just kind of make it a soft date and see, how long it takes everything to get ordered and in place and everything else. Because we never know what will happen when we go to install something down there or ordering a part. It says 2 weeks, it could be 3 weeks. So I don't know if we want to pick a hard date, just make it kind of a soft, we're going to shoot for this date.
So what do you want to shoot for, the 10th or the 31st? I'm thinking maybe the 31st.
The 31st seems prudent.
Okay,
Same.
everyone, any concerns with that? Okay, Mr. Lombardi, you have the shoot date. We're going to shoot for the 31st.
Okay, I'll get down there tomorrow and test test the Wi-Fi, and then I'll give you a call and get everything finalized as far as what we need to order and how to get it ordered. And then I return back to work on August 3rd, so I'm going to have limited availability during the day. But I'll try to get make myself available as much as possible for anything that Bob needs or whatever.
Thank you, I appreciate that. That's all I have, Ed.
All right, thank you. With that said, community development.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Before I get started on old legislation, I just wanted to touch base really quickly with the rezoning of the Lutheran, St. John's Lutheran Church. Everybody should have received on July 16th, a letter announcing that St. John's Lutheran was withdrawing their application for rezoning, and we're going to attempt to re-present that to the zoning commission. That's the last update I've gotten at this point, so I think they're just probably waiting to make some changes as necessary and put that in front of the Board of Zoning at this point. So I just kind of wanted to touch base with that and say that everything's kind of on hold at this point until it comes in front of us again. Any questions on that? Okay, just making sure everybody was up to date. And the only other piece of legislation I have today is we still have ordinance number 60/2020 before us. We had talked a couple weeks ago about the suggestion of voting it down and kind of starting fresh with new legislation once we determine how much money we have in the funds available, that the COVID federal funds. I think it's a good idea that we need to work with the administration to use some of that funding for some grants if we do still see that there is a need for grant applications and for grant funding to the small businesses in the city. Currently, just a quick update before we get a little deeper. I did shoot an email to Samantha today. There have been 17 applications under the CARES Act funding for the small business loans. Samantha, I do see that you're on the phone tonight, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Do we have a timeline as to when we are going to receive those funds to be able to disperse them to small businesses?
I have not heard anything back yet, but I've been in contact with my HUD rep, and I actually have submitted the amended plan. So as soon as I hear anything, I will certainly update this council and let you know where we stand.
And of those 17 applications, do you see a rough estimate of how many will be awarded funds by any chance?
I have a few that I actually have to go back and ask for additional supporting documentation. Some were submitted without any supporting documentation for the finances. So I can't say a number right now until I get that documentation, but I do have, I would say at least 9 or 10 of them look like they should be eligible.
Okay. And so are you helping these individuals if they have questions with this application or any concerns? Are you available or somebody in your office available to walk them through what is necessary and what paperwork is necessary to attach to the application?
Yes, absolutely. So I've put information on the website. I've made my email address available, my office phone available. I can certainly answer any questions that anybody has. And I actually welcome questions. If people, even doubt that they're eligible, I'd like to encourage businesses to just give me a call. We can talk through it. You never know until you ask. So
perfect. So council members, if you could make sure you pass that on to any small business owners that you're speaking with to make sure they know to at least call Samantha and just ask and see if they are eligible. We have a significant amount of funds that we need to use. So I'd like to see those being utilized to the small businesses. Any questions for Samantha on that update? Mr. Lewis.
Do we know how many inquiries, maybe people that haven't filled out an application but have at least inquired?
I'd say
Ms. Walters?
I've had about 4 or 5 additional inquiries from people that have not yet submitted applications. So, and I do have email addresses for a few of them, so I can keep in contact that way if they have any questions. But about 5 additional inquiries from applicants that have not submitted anything yet.
And then of those who are not qualifying, do you have a general feel as to what the obstacle is that's keeping them from qualifying?
So far, from the applications that I've received, I don't have anybody that does not qualify, but I do have several that I need additional information for. So I don't have anybody that I've denied, but there could be in those other applications that I need to get some documentation for.
Ms. Littman?
Yes, I guess so. If I'm doing some calculating here, if the maximum amount of the award was 5,000, is that correct, Samantha?
Yes.
And we were looking at 17, so we've got 85,000 of our 276,000 that can be spoken for, and the additional 5 would, let's see, would be another 25,000. So we are still well under the 276,000-ish, if I'm remembering correctly, that is available under those the revised HUD application. Do you envision any other companies that have inquired that are looking for funds, or based on the 22 applicants that we have, you think we've been able to cover most businesses that are looking for funding?
I would say I haven't had a huge rush in inquiries. We could still, assuming that every applicant that we have is eligible, we could still take quite a few applications. But there's not a lot of outreach. People haven't reached out too much. I know that Dave Maley was out in the community distributing some PPE kits to businesses, and he did discuss it with a couple business owners. And then also I spoke with the Stark Minority Business Association. The mayor had referred them to me to kind of just explain the program to them a little bit. They are sending something out to all of their members in Massillon to let them know about the program. But at this point, there's not been a great rush for applications for the funding. So I did publish an ad in the paper. We did put it out on our social media. It's on the website. So certainly if you guys are out in the community, everybody could help encourage business owners to reach out. But as of right now, I don't see the funding expiring anytime soon.
Thank you, Samantha.
Sure.
Okay, any more questions for Samantha on that? Okay, seeing none, back to ordinance 60. We had talked about, kind of starting fresh with new legislation once we determine how much more need we have. It looks like the need is trickling in quite slowly at this point. So I think that will help us in the long run to determine how much additional funding we need to release and have out there for the citizens of Massillon once we kind of get more applications in and get this funding from HUD. We received a significant amount of money from the federal government to cover for COVID expenses. I think some of that should definitely go towards additional small businesses if there's small businesses that don't qualify for the CDBG funding. So at this point, my recommendation, I think, would be next week to vote down 60-2020, and then we'll just keep up with making sure that we know how much funding we still have left from the city and utilizing that funding to give it out to small businesses as we see a need continuing throughout this year. Any questions, concerns from those in my community development? Mr. Lewis.
I'm okay with voting this particular one down, but I don't want the spirit of what it represents to be lost, if that makes sense. So if we're gonna vote it down, I would be in favor of us drafting legislation that would use the CARES Act dollars, the 575,000 that we're getting, and put together a program that not only could get grants to small businesses, but you can also use some of this money to provide a mortgage and rental relief or eviction relief to families that are in our community that have also been hit hard. So I would be in favor of us looking at, you know, enhancing what we're looking at. So we have this first piece that Mr. Hurricane and Mr. Thayer put in forth of us. I would look at wanting to enhance that by adding that family model to it so that they are funds there. And maybe we can use like 150,000 of that 575 for this purpose. And we don't have to wait so much for businesses and so much for families. We can just leave it as that whole dollar amount and then wait to see what comes in, and then, you know, utilize accordingly. I really think, and we probably need to jump on that right away. Ms. Taylor, I don't know if that's something that maybe you would want to try to work with the administration on, or I'd be willing to, Nancy, whatever. Kind of let you kind of take the lead on that since it's the community development, but that's just my thoughts on it.
I think that's a good idea to add that possible cushion for those that have had issues with mortgages or rentals, etc. Samantha, I'm going to put you on the spot here, so if you don't have the answer, that's fine. Have you had anybody reaching out looking for any type of help in that realm where it comes to mortgage, rentals, or evictions and struggling at this time?
We actually had one agency reach out to see if we had allocated any funding towards that, and I unfortunately can't remember the name of. It was a nonprofit group. I can't remember the name at this time, but that's as far as I know, and I can check with Bev Lewis and see if she's had any inquiries. But that one agency is all I know of at this time.
Okay, thank you. So there has been a little bit of interest in that, and I think you know, we've seen evictions starting back up again, and obviously people have probably struggled on mortgages and their rent at this point. I think that's something we definitely should look into. Council members, what are your thoughts? Mr. Thayer, I saw your hand earlier, so I'll go with you, then Ms. Lippman.
Thank you, Mr. A big issue, and I'm not downplaying at all the assistance that the residents could get from this initial bill of $5,000. But please keep in mind, these folks were shut down for months at a time, and several that I've talked to as recently as today are still, you know, 5 and 6 months behind rent. So we're talking 10 times, 15 times the 5,000. So anything that we do, I would heartily encourage us to be as open as we can on this, because it hurt bad. As many more, and I can't argue against the families facing mortgage issues and evictions too. I see that this is going to be a horrendous issue here very, very shortly. Again, I would just encourage us to have an open mind to this and keep it on the front burner. Thank you.
Ms. Lippman.
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Sterrett. I just wanted to get an update from the auditor on what our new expense balance is of our 576 that we were given for the COVID dollars. I know in meetings past, she's been able to give us what has been submitted thus far. And I believe our last figure was like 110,000 of that. Can we get an update as to what has been submitted thus far?
Hi, this is Jane Ferrero, and I don't have those actual figures, but Debbie Bonk, my chief auditor, she may have those. Debbie, do you have those?
No, I do not. I know we just got some in from Lori, but I don't have a total on what those were. I'm going to say it's probably not much more than another 5,000.
Okay.
Would you be willing to maybe figure out that number for city council and update us this week on that, Jane?
We sure can. We'll send it out to you. We'll send it out to
Absolutely.
you probably at weekend. Is that all right?
Perfect. Yes, thank you. Okay, that's all I have at this point. Is there any other further discussion at this point?
Ms. Sterrett,
Yes, Mr. Lewis.
I just wanted to add, I agree that, we've heard in the past that, this 575, it goes well down into the fall. And so there might be expenses that we don't see yet or might incur. I guess my way of looking at it, and the reason I want to use some of that for these home, for the residents of Massillon and for businesses in Massillon is, to me, it's a hard pill to swallow that the city's going to get this lump chunk of money to help it out and we don't pass it on. So that's why I'm encouraging passing some of that on. I feel like it's the right thing to do. And we can afford to do it at this time. So, and to Mr. Thayer's point, I think from what I've heard, these monies might be able to go all the way up to $10,000. So that is a benefit, and hopefully we can capture some of those businesses that may be falling through the cracks of other opportunities. Is just my thought process. Again, we like I said, Mr. I don't know who wants to take the lead on this. There's probably a little bit of research that needs to be done, but it'd be nice if we can get this ball rolling and quickly. I don't want this to be something that we're still talking about in October.
Absolutely, I agree. I think we need to moving forward with this with administration as soon as possible. I see Mr. Lombardi, but I think was that Ms. Ferrero that was trying to chime in?
I am. Thank you so much, Megan. I appreciate it very much. And listen, I just found out that we can do some hands-free sinks in all of our areas throughout the city. And that is all going to be paid for through all this COVID money. And so we could put those all in place. And that is a wonderful thing. So I'm going to go forward and look into all of that. There are many things that we cannot use it for, but there are many things we can use that money for. And so we are going to try very hard to use it. And I think that would be a very good place for our money to be used for hands-free sinks throughout the city of Massillon. What do you all think? I'd like a little input.
Can you explain what a hands-free sink would look like or operate like?
I'm asking you what you think about a hands-free sink, that you just put your hands under the faucet and you don't have to turn a faucet handle.
And where would they be installed?
All over the city of Massillon.
I think that sounds like a nice idea, but if I had to decide between hands-free sinks in the city and helping residents, I'm going to lean towards residents, if that's what it came down to, cost-wise.
Mr. Lewis, that is an awesome thing that you said, but we have very strict restrictions that we have to use, just so you know that. And we have all this money that we need to use, so we need to use it wisely.
Could we ask that if you have suggestions such as this, or if there are others that have suggested uses for those funds, that they bring it to this type of a forum to council so that we can have discussion, not only on just this item, but on other suggestions that maybe you're thinking of, or administration is thinking of, or you're getting guidance on from other municipalities where these funds can be used that we may not be thinking of at the moment, but that would be something that's beneficial for the city. Is that something that you'd be willing to do coming forward to us regularly?
My office was on a web call with somebody that said what restrictions that we have with these funds, how we can use them. And so that's what I'm passing on to you, is that we can use that money for certain things, but there are certain things we cannot use that money for. So we need to be very, very careful how we use it.
I think that's where it comes in that Mr. Lewis and I probably should start doing some research on Mr. Lewis's idea of trying to utilize this funds for small businesses up to maybe $10,000 or more, and also seeing if we can utilize some of it for mortgage relief, eviction relief, things like that. I think we need to determine what exactly we can utilize these funds for. And I agree that if we can utilize some of it to give back to the citizens of Massillon, we absolutely should. I see your point, Jane. I believe, hands-free sinks and definitely in certain areas would probably be good. And the sanitary, such as like in the court areas where we have a significant amount of the public coming in and out of the municipal building. But I think we definitely need to start getting on some research to determine exactly where those funds can be utilized. Any other questions? Mr. Lombardi, sorry, I forgot about you.
Thank you, Mrs. Sterrett. It seems to me I recall that somebody had said when we first started talking about these CDBG funds coming in for the COVID relief, that wasn't it that we had to have applications completed by the 31st of October. So this could be a little bit more. I recall hearing that, and I'm not sure if I'm correct in that. But if I am, then this is a little bit got to move a little bit faster than what we are at this point.
Ms. Ferrero, do you have any information on that? That does sound familiar, Mr. Lombardi.
I do not. I'm sorry.
I will look into that and double check that with the administration as well, because I thought we did have something that these funds had to be spent maybe up until the fall to spend the funds or something along those lines. I'm not 100% sure, but that does sound familiar.
Mrs. Sterrett, this is Linda Lippman.
Yes, Linda.
I believe that was through the end of the year, but the costs needed to be submitted before October 31st or by October 31st, but they needed to be spent by December 31st, or they would need to be returned. So the October 31st was that you could still spend them thereafter, but you'd have to have an idea of the submission of what they would be used for. I guess that was my understanding, and I believe that came from Lori had a meeting for on that information.
Okay.
Debbie, we have to have that money appropriated by a certain amount of time, right? Debbie Bump.
Yeah, if he's talking about the COVID money that we received, it has to be encumbered and on a PO by, I think it's October 31st, because that's our first wave of returning money. And any money that's not encumbered, meaning it's set aside for a particular purpose and encumbered, we can keep it. Any money that's not encumbered has to be returned. And the encumbered money has to be returned by the end of the year, December 30th, I think it is.
Okay, thank you. So we need to get on this as soon as possible. Mr. Gregg.
Thanks, Mrs. Sterrett. My comments are, I don't want to see us give back even $1 back to an entity that's providing these funds. I think every single cent needs to be used for various purposes in the city of Massillon. Primarily, I think, as like we've discussed with the business owners, and I absolutely 100% behind Mr. Lewis's idea to use some for rent relief and mortgage relief for residents of Massillon that have been hit hard in that regard. And that'll also help landlords in Massillon that have had residents that haven't been able to pay their rent. So I'm 100% behind that. It sounds to me like we need a pretty comprehensive plan of how we want to use every one of those dollars. And we've got to get input obviously from individuals or an individual that knows how they can and cannot be spent. So what I'd like to see is a complete plan put together for all of the dollars, assuming we know what the total amount is. Once we know, if we don't know it now, once we do know it, so that we do have that all ready to go and appropriated and not run the risk of losing any of it. So that's my comment on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gregg. Anybody else tonight? That is all I have, Mr. Lewis.
Environmental,
Nothing from environmental.
health and welfare,
Nothing for health and welfare.
Parks and Rec. Jill did not tell me of anything that was in that committee that needed to be discussed tonight, or the committee members have anything that they want to discuss?
She'd indicated to me that we did not have anything further to discuss this evening.
Thank you. Police and fire.
I don't have anything specific for this evening. I do want to indicate as well that I've heard many positive responses by residents from their police encounters, and there's been a variety of them. Of course, there always is over the city, but those that I've heard of more recently have been positive, whether it be through animal control situations or situations where our police officers are out assisting our residents in a variety of different aspects. So I just definitely wanted to shout out kudos to our police force based on responses that I've had recently from residents. I don't have any pending legislation in police and fire, but I did want to, Ed, have just a few minutes at the end of our work session to catch up on a few items that were just outstanding in general.
Okay. I don't know if you're aware of this yet, Ms. Littman or other council people, but we did receive the 2019 annual report from the clerk of courts. I believe they're sitting in our mailboxes. So it's just good information if you go down there and pick it up. It gives you a good understanding of what's going on through our court systems and whatnot. All right.
Excuse me, Ed, or I could email that to them if they don't want to come in.
Absolutely. Okay.
You said I didn't make any.
All right. Public utilities.
Nothing from public utilities, Ed.
Rules and courts.
I don't have anything new. I do have a piece that received first reading last week that I want to discuss further. It's ordinance number 71, 2020. It's the ordinance requesting that we appoint Samantha Walters, I believe, as city records custodian. Mr. Maley and I spoke about this past week, and we think that perhaps this isn't really the way we want to do this legislation as in terms of picking a particular person. We'd rather just appoint a position, because as that position changes and people come and go, we're going to have to change or amend the legislation each time. So we thought perhaps a better way to go on that would be to I think amend this legislation to not name a specific person as our public records custodian. Mr. Maley, I believe, is on the line. Dave, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I do. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, I had a change of direction on that, and I haven't had a chance to talk to her. I talked to Debbie Bonk late this afternoon with regards to that. And it's our understanding that the auditor, that is something the state auditors require, that there'll be a person named for records custodian. So at this point in time, I would probably recommend that we just move forward with what we currently have with regards to Ms. Walters being the records custodian as written.
Okay.
Excuse me, this is Jane Ferrero, the auditor, and I
Yes.
agree we need to name a certain person. It does not need to be generic. It needs to be a certain person.
All right. Well, that's new information. Okay. So any questions or discussion on this by anybody else from councils? specifically Rules and Courts Committee. Mrs. Lippman, I see your hand.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Gregg. I guess my question is, what exactly are the responsibilities of the city records custodian? And does that fall under the duties that, in this case, Samantha already has on her job duties, or is this another position itself that we're just consolidating into what she's currently doing?
I'll let somebody from administration address that if they would.
Dave Maley?
I can address it, or Samantha, would you like to address it?
Sure, I can actually take that. So the records custodian would be the person that is responsible for determining retention periods, destroying records, and then the public records requests as well are going to fall under that position. So it actually does not fall in anybody's current job duties, but I've had extensive training as far as that goes, because as you all know, that's a position that I started in with the city. So it just kind of made sense. As the mayor had spoken about, with Bill Perini not in at the moment due to the coronavirus situation, for me to take over those responsibilities and continue moving forward with the public record requests. And all of our retention schedules are all set right now, but when destruction does come up, you have to have that person that has that title involved in the destruction of the records to certify that they were all destroyed in the proper method. So it doesn't fall under anybody's current job duties. I've taken that over since just within the last couple months. I've taken back over on those.
Yes, Mrs. Lippman.
Thank you, Mr. Gregg. So is this a permanent, with this ordinance, it would be a permanent change where when the prior, or if the prior city records custodian would be able to come back, or COVID, no longer is a concern for him, is it basically eliminating that position and he does not have that position to come back to? Or is this something temporary that, if things subside, where we would go back to the way things were previously?
Again,
I would say, go ahead, sorry.
And it's a position, and Samantha would be taking that over.
I'm sorry, did you say it would be permanent?
It would be a permanent position that Samantha would be taking over.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
While we're on the subject, any question I would have is if at some point down the road, Samantha is no longer doing these duties, that means we will need to pass a new ordinance. Is that correct?
You're absolutely correct.
Okay. Yes, Mrs. Sterrett.
Thank you, Mr. Gregg. I'm not opposed to this. I know, public records requests and following the rules of the Public Records Act in Ohio is practically a full-time job. I mean, there are a significant amount of regulations and rules, and they change. And I mean, everything from you can't ask a person their name when they make public records requests to how you have to hand them large documents, whether you provide them with a disk or a flash drive, things like that. There's all kinds of rules and things that need to be followed. So I'm not opposed to this. I think it does need to be a permanent kind of thing.
Thank you, Mrs. Sterrett. That brings up a question I would have is, does Samantha have capacity for these additional duties along with what she's currently doing?
She's absolutely responsible for all of it.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
She's absolutely responsible for doing all of it.
And she has the capacity to do so, and meaning the time needed. Is that what you're saying?
I am saying that. She sure does. She does a wonderful job.
All right. Thank you very much. Any other questions or discussion? All right, well, this one's already received first reading, so, and it does have emergency language, so I don't see any reason why we don't bring this up for vote on Monday. And that's all I have. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And that's all I have, Mr. Lewis. Thank you.
All right, streets.
Yes, we have that one piece in front of us here. It's just another one of those basically asking permission for the state to work on guardrails on State Route 21. I understand Mr. Popeil's on there. You can probably explain if you have any questions. It seems to me these things come through every time they need to work here. It's just granting permission. And if I read through it, it says the state's covered 100% of the costs. So I didn't
Yeah, Mr. Ferry, you're correct. It's another permission to do work in the city. In 2021, ODOT is replacing the guardrails or maintaining them and replacing in some cases on 21 from Wayne County all the way into the city. And actually within the city, it's going to be from the northern limit to about halfway between Cherry and Lake. So that's the only little section that they'll be in the city, but they just are asking for permission to do it. It is 100% covered by ODOT, and it's just simply roadside maintenance and guardrail maintenance and replacement as necessary.
Any questions or concerns? Seeing none, I request to have this on our agenda for Monday's council meeting and get this back to the state officials. That's all I have.
Do we have verbals from anyone else on the committee?
Betsy Holler gives her verbal. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, finance. We have a few pieces tonight. I'll go ahead and turn it back over to Ms. Walters. The first piece is the request of legislation for CDBG.
Thank you. So the legislation that I have put forward for today is for appropriations for the 2020 program year funds. And the reason that we don't bring this together with the budget when you approve the budget back in May is because I always like to wait until the actual funding is received from HUD, which we have now received our line of credit for 2020 program year. It's actually historically early, so that's a good thing. But I am bringing forward the appropriations again for that. Ordinance 42/2020, you passed the 2020 program year budget. So does anybody have any questions regarding this for me?
All right, well, that's simple. We'll go ahead and.
Can I ask one question? I'm sorry.
Sure.
Samantha?
Yes.
You have the target area streets at 115,000, and you may have had the listing of streets that were going to be funded with that previously, but I can't recall if we actually know what those funds are going to be used for, the 115,000 stating target area streets.
We don't yet. Those will actually be done in the spring of 2021. So that list will come out. Right now, we're under contract for actually the 2019 program year target streets. So we don't have a listing of the streets yet for the 2020 program year.
Do we know when those might be put in place, or so that we can look at where those dollars are going to be spent? We have them all ranked, correct? So should we know, that's maybe 9 months from now, where we are looking at spending those dollars?
Usually, what we do is, thank you. Go ahead, Mary.
I was just going to say that typically what we do is we do have a list of rated streets, but the engineer department will go through after the winter's over and reassess to see if other streets were damaged more so from the winter. And then they'll put together a list of what they think we can do, and they'll bring it over to my office. Barb and I will review it with them, and then we'll create legislation to bring to council. That's typically how we do it.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Thayer, or no, I'm sorry, this is talking about the funding. This is my committee. We got talking about streets and it got me confused thinking we were back to Mr. Thayer. I just would add also that if I recall correctly, because it's CDBG, the streets have to be within a CDBG area, and those are typically the second, fourth, and fifth wards. I think primarily there might be a little bit out into the third, but I don't know if we have CDBG neighborhoods in the first or the sixth. Just something to keep in mind. But I could be wrong. Mr. Gray?
Thank you, Mr. I just had a quick question. I noticed on the copy I have, and I'm sure it's the one that we all have, a couple editings done on the request legislation. I just want to question, Meals on Wheels has been scratched out and Vantage Aging and put in its place. Is that just a name change?
Yes,
Or
it
that
is.
Okay,
Vantage
so Meals on Wheels.
Aging and Meals on Wheels merged, so they're now under the name of Vantage Aging.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I'll have my verbal to place that on the agenda. Do I have anyone else?
Megan Starrett.
Thank you.
Mike Gregg also.
Thank you.
All right, the next piece we have is coming from the municipal court. And Diane, I believe in our packet, we have a duplication of one. We'll figure that out as we go. The first piece we have from the municipal court is please prepare legislation to appropriate from the unappropriated balance of the Muni Court Computer Fund 1233 to the services and contracts item of that same fund number for a total of $15,000. And this is to pay necessary computer services and contracts for the court. I intended to contact the courts today, but I did get caught up with some other business, so I was not able to reach out to them for any additional information. But this is money that's within their allowances, so all we're doing is moving it for them so they can actually spend it. Any other questions related to this one? Yes, Ms. Sylvester?
Yeah, this is Debbie Bonk.
Oh, yes, Ms. Bonk.
Okay, those two that you see there, one for 15,000 and one for 10,000. One of them's paid from a services and contract line item, and one of them's paid from supplies and materials. So that's why you need the two. They could have put them both together and made it 25,000, 15,000 into one line and 10,000 into the other line from the same fund, 1233.
Yeah, yeah, the 1204 one, we have two requests for legislation asking for $10,000 to go from the municipal court special court fund 1204 and placing it into the equipment of 1204.
Yeah, they're probably paying it from two different funds.
Okay. I see what you're saying.
Right.
Well, anyways, on the first one that we just discussed, are there any questions? All right, I give my verbal for it to be on for Monday.
I have a question, Ed. Can those two be put together since they're under the same fund? They're just different line items?
I say we can bundle away. You know me, I like to bundle.
Okay.
You can put, this is Debbie Bunk, you can put all four of them together.
Okay. Okay. Great. Thank you. Okay, so which one were we discussing here? I need the verbals.
1233, 125, 5, 2392.
Okay.
That's the line item for 15,000.
I give my verbal. Megan Starrett.
Okay, thank you.
Mike Gregg, I give my verbal also.
Thank you.
Okay, then I'm going to skip to this other one. It's appropriate from the unappropriated balance of the Safety Forces Improvement Fund 1205 to the following line item. It's 1205, 125, 5, 2392, $20,000, which is the fund number 1205 Safety Services and Contracts. And this is to pay necessary service contracts for court and police. Any questions on this? All right. Ms. Bonk, do you have any idea of what project they're working on that is requiring this?
I'm sorry, I do not, but I did ask Jeannie if any of this was COVID money related, and she did say no, it was not. That's all I asked. I'm sorry.
No problem. I give my verbal for that one.
Thank you.
I'll give my verbal. Megan Starrett.
Thank you.
Mike Gregg, you have my verbal also.
Thank you.
All right, then we have two more. They're both for $10,000, but they are coming out of, as Ms. Bonk explained, they're coming out of separate line items. They're for $10,000 each, and one is to pay for equipment purchases for the court. They're both, and the other one is to purchase for computer equipment for the court. I give my verbal. I'll give my verbal on both of those to also go on for Monday.
As will I, Megan Starrett.
Thank you.
And verbal from Mike Gregg as well.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any topics or discussions they want to make on those items that we just discussed? Ms. Lippman?
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. I would just ask that if someone could find out what the project is, just to be able to know and be informed as to, what these funds are going to be spent on. I think that would be nice if someone would at least report back to us, just for informational purposes.
Absolutely. I'll look into it. Like I said, I wanted to do it today, but I got caught up. But it's $55,000 total, so it would be nice to have a little bit more knowledge.
Yeah. Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, the next piece is old business. It's related to the transfer of funds into the civil service line item related to benefits and salary and whatnot. That will be coming up for third reading, I believe. Does anybody have any questions or discussion this evening? Okay. So that'll come up for third reading. The last piece we have is related to the hospital expenses. It's $245,000, $160,000 of which will be for money that is owed to quorum related to real estate taxes. The additional $85,000, $75,000 would be utilities, $10,000 for services and contracts. We've had a lot of discussion recently, and I believe we'll continue to have a lot of discussion. Originally tonight, I wanted to come in and I wanted to discuss the amending of this piece of legislation, removing the $85,000 for bills and services and contracts and leaving only the $160,000 in there to pay quorum. However, having a conversation with the income tax director and budget director this afternoon, there are bills that are due August 17th that this money is to be appropriated and utilized for. Originally, I felt that if the money was there to take care of immediate needs, we could put off actually spending this and to kind of see what the progress is with the hospital before we appropriate more dollars. But if there's an immediate need for paying of bills, I don't see how we can get around not appropriating the dollars to pay those costs. Does anyone on the committee have anything they would like to say or add regarding this? Sarah.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. I have no opposition to this ordinance this time. I know we all want to be rid of the hospital and be done with it, but I don't think not paying bills is the way to go. I know there's some council members that have stated that they don't want to fund any hospital expenses, but it's a property that we own. We can't allow it to go into disrepair. We need to be fiscally responsible and pay the bills as they come due at this point, whether we like it or not. We can't just ignore bills. They don't go away. And that could damage the city financially if we just ignore bills that need to be paid. So I am in full support of just making sure that we get the bills paid. It doesn't mean we're in support of holding on to the hospital any longer, but we have bills that need paid, and the responsible thing to do as city council is to make sure that the funds are there.
Mr. Gregg?
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. I agree with Mrs. Stara. I think I do not want to continue to see good money going after bad, of course, but we've got bills that we've incurred. We need to pay them just like anybody else has to. So I agree that we need to obviously get real tight hold on what is happening going forward with the bills and so forth with the hospital. But anything that's already due, I think, needs to be paid.
I agree. Let me see. I'm pulling up some information I have. I apologize for looking down. I had inquired today as to what bills were coming due on the 17th. I'm learning to read your mind, Linda.
Thank you.
I don't have the amounts though, and I know you're going to ask that next, but I at least know the names. ThyssenKrupp is one of them, and that is an elevator company. MCTV, this is used for the alarm system and the Wi-Fi that the alarm system uses up at the building. We have Dominion, Aqua, Ohio Edison, and then AT&T, which I inquired about because I didn't understand why we had AT&T. And this is the last bill from them, and it was for a service when we had telephones in the elevators. But as we continue to shut down elements of the facility and lower our cost and keeping it only as minimum, this AT&T one was one that we were able to get rid of. So we just have to pay one final bill with them. With that said, I agree with the comments made tonight that these are bills that we have. We can't get away from it. You know, when I talk to members in the community about it, one of the things I point out is, you know, you wouldn't stop paying your electric bill just because you're not happy. Or if you had a property, however you came about it, and it had certain maintenance costs and you wanted to get rid of that property, you wouldn't stop paying those maintenance costs simply because you were unhappy of not having it. The harsh reality is if we don't pay these bills on time, we're going to get hit with penalties. So what would have been one bill it'll just become more expensive, and we're going to pay it regardless. There's no way around it. You're going to pay that bill. If you don't pay that bill, then that could reflect poorly on the city's ability to do business, which would affect our bond rating and other things, which will hurt us in the future. And it would be for no reason because you had the money the whole time anyways. So those are things to think about. The last thing I want to point out, and I think this is important, and I know I sing this song every week, but it's the biggest fact that plays into the hospital. The hospital has brought in $4.3 million of revenue over the past 2.5 years. It has only cost us between 2.8 and 2.9 million. So that means there's about a $1.4 million to the good that we have. It has generated more revenue than it has cost. When you look at our cost report and you look at that last number that says unencumbered balance of general fund, 2-3 weeks ago, it said 1.8 million. Well, of that 1.8 million, 1.4 was the hospitals. The city itself was only at 400,000 to the good. So at that point in time, the hospital was actually benefiting us and keeping us in a stronger fiscal position than we would have been without it. Now we're up to 3 million. We've gotten a little bit more balanced. But we can't sit here and try to act as if this hospital has been a burden to our community when it has paid for itself. It has benefited the community because it's put us in a stronger financial position. We've had people mention that they want to use funds from the hospital to benefit other people. Well, it's not a benefit and a burden at the same time. It's either a benefit or a burden. So I just want us to think about that moving forward. The costs aren't going away. It's generated more than it's cost. So at this point, we're good. With all that said, though, we are on the clock. And I think Mr. Hurricanes brought that up through the thoughts on the roof and other things. We are on the clock, but we are not at the end of the game yet. So we have to be responsible and fiscally responsible for the benefit of our city. Anybody else want to discuss this? Mr. Therrick?
Yeah, I mean, still my biggest question is when is enough enough? You all agree we're throwing money down a rabbit hole. There's no end game in sight. If we are looking at demolition as it looks like that's going to be, Is $1 million enough for that? I'm thinking no. What I know about it. So I think we are quickly approaching, if we haven't already passed that point of diminishing return on this hospital. We
There
have
is,
some
Mayor.
money, sure, there's something there, but for how long? That's my
No,
concern.
and I think that's to the exact point that I was just trying to also make, is that we are coming to the end. We need to see action happen. But putting ourselves in a position where we are incurring fees and penalties for non-payment of bills, I mean, that is fiscally irresponsible. I would never, ever recommend to a family member, a business owner, or anybody I care about to not pay their financial obligations. And I was not elected to this office to take that position either.
I'm saying the same thing, but why are we incurring the bills? That's all I got.
And
Mr.
Nancy would
Lisman,
like to speak.
I'm sorry, Ms. Sylvester, we have a couple council members which are still speaking, so I'll get to you in just a second. Mr. Gregg?
Actually, I'm kind of talking to myself there, but I'm just saying, yeah, I agree with you, Mr. Lewis. You know, we cannot pay the bills. I know what, Mr. Therrett, I know what you're saying, and I agree with that as well. I think maybe we're coming to the end of the game a little quicker than we thought we would or are, but those bills still have to be paid. When does it end? The answer is when disposition of the hospital and the property is done, and we don't at this point have that in front of us, and we don't have any control over it. So that was all I was kind of saying to myself, is that when that point is not here yet, obviously, and we gotta hang on until it is, and we need to urge the administration to move forward with the parties that are interested and try and get something done as quickly as possible.
Mr. Lombardi?
I just want to say, in response to a few of the comments, the hospital is not a burden to us now, but where's it going to be in a year if we don't have anything resolved on this? Then it is going to start being a burden on the city. And then we're going to be paying bills, the tune that we're still paying, with money coming out of the taxpayers' pockets or something that they don't even benefit from.
Ed, Nancy would like to speak.
Yes, Ms. Halter?
Thank you. I think I'm probably the only councilman that lives directly in the hospital's neighborhood. Been there since 1967. I've seen a lot of changes at the hospital. What has become, since the hospital has closed, our neighborhood is very fast going downhill. So whatever happens, I hope the city will keep in mind that we can't just leave it sit there. Right now, it's a mess. There's weeds growing all over the parking lot on State Street, 8th Street. If you had to live there and look at it every day, the houses on Amherst Road that used to be beautiful are now in deterioration. They've been sold and they're now rental properties and they're not being taken care of. And that all has started from the hospital. So just keep in mind that I do not want you to keep the hospital, obviously, but we have to come up, we have to be sure whatever we leave is livable, I guess. Just keep my neighbors in mind. Thank you.
Hey, Ms. Halter, I want to say that's an excellent point. I spoke to Mr. Pedro today down at the parks, and while they're not in a position to be able to help us maintain the property due to their own obligations and struggles that they have with the multiple parks, he was able to provide some insight of some steps that we can take to allow the property to look more attractive and more easily maintained. I'll talk to the administration and maybe they can reach out to Mr. Pedro and get some of those ideas from him directly. Ms. Littman.
Yes, Mr. Lewis, I believe in our last meeting, the mayor was able to update us on the interest in the property, and she gave us the 3 entities, not names, but that there are 3 entities that remain interested. could we ask administration for any update of any of the progress on any of the 3 that showed interest or continue to show interest?
Sure. Ms. Sylvester or Madam Mayor, I know Ms. Sylvester, I think you were trying to speak at one point, but either one of you, if you'd like to chime in.
Mr. Lewis, it was the mayor who is going to speak.
All right, thank you.
Hi, everyone. As I said last Monday when we spoke, we have submitted the paperwork, the lease agreement to the VA. So we are still waiting to hear back from them as to where we are in the paperwork, as the status of that. And then the other 2 entities, we're still working with them, and we're trying to move them as quickly as we can. We know that we too would like to have a solid deal for the property, but that property is marketable. And I wanted to assure council that we have auctioned off the majority of the equipment inside, but there is still valuables in the hospital to be auctioned off. So that if that hospital is demolished, we still can find funds, and we may be bringing that to council in the next several months to go back to auction and finish auctioning off the other valuable assets in the hospital. So there's still a way to make some dollars off of the property that we acquired.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then
What we are
Lori,
waiting on, let
Moran,
me just add to this. What we are waiting on is that VA portion and the one entity that would like to utilize the hospital. We're waiting on that deal before we auction off the rest of the valuables. Thank you.
Thank you. Lori Moran, I don't imagine you have this right off the top of your head, but could you get us this week what the monthly cost is now down to? I know at one point it was up about 100,000 or so, and if you take 2.8 million divided by 30, you get 93,333 a month. But there was a lot of front end costs that we have gotten rid of since then. Would you be able to get that number for us?
Yes, I sure can, Mr. Lewis. I can email it to you.
And I think that'll help all of us in understanding where is that wall. Obviously, we don't want to run it all the way down, but it'll help us better gauge. Mr. Gregg?
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. I just wanted to comment on, based on something I heard the mayor say. I agree that property is marketable. However, I also remember back when this all began, and I was very young on council at that point, but we talked about the fact we were not looking to make a profit off the sale of the property of this hospital and contents as well. So the contents is a little bit different. Obviously, we want to sell those and get the money we can out of that property. But as far as the property itself, the building and the land, I'm hoping that we're not looking to make a deal, holding this property to make the best deal we can, and trying to get the last dollar out of it. Obviously, we want to do well for the city, but the bottom line is we don't want to end up with a hole in the ground we're throwing money into. And so that's my comment. I'm glad it's considered marketable. I agree it probably is, but I would say the main thing is we got to get out from under this before it starts costing the citizens a lot of money.
And I think, Mr. Gregg, maybe you might have said it better than I did. I think that's where we're all at. I don't think there's a single member on council here that doesn't agree with that point, that we're starting to get nervous about how long, Mr. Lombardi said it there, to said that, how long is it going to be before we get past? I just want to continue, like I've said, to point out that we're not there yet, and we have current financial obligations to be met. Mr. Lombardi?
Yeah, one other thing I wanted to point out, Mr. Lewis, we have, we keep talking about this VA lease deal. Does the city really want to go into the real estate business and become a landlord? Because that's what that deal sounds like it's going to be. You know, I'm inclined to agree with what Mr. Gregg just said. You know, it is a marketable property. I think we just need to start getting out and marketing it. I don't believe that we've been doing our due diligence on, you know, looking into potential buyers.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Mr. Lombardi. And I'll tell you, I have a similar thought as far as landlording and leases. I've just reserved my personal comments on that until we actually have something in front of us, you know. Anybody else? Mr. Hurricane?
Mr. Lewis, I agree it's a valuable piece of property, but not with a building on it. I think demolition is the ultimate result here. I think we're ignoring the inevitable. I don't think anybody's going to use the facility. The lease with the VA is for a little less than 20,000 square feet. I would assume that even if we passed that, we would still be spending maintenance on the rest of the building. To me, an answer to this is that we pay zero. And I don't think any of these interested parties that say they want to use the facility are going to use the entire facility. And I think we're going to be holding the bag.
Mr. Lewis,
Yes, Ms. Alter.
has there been any thought given to perhaps getting the property over to a real estate firm that could take care of marketing and possibly finding a good buyer for this property?
Would the administration be able to
answer
answer that?
Sure. I can answer that. Yes, Nancy, we have discussed that. We are trying to work with the entities at hand. If the two entities work out, they'll be working together. And the other one does not want to utilize the hospital at all, and they would demolish it themselves. So we do have some opportunities in front of us that we're trying to work through. We have discussed that if these come to a dead end, that we would go forward and auction off the rest of the assets inside the hospital. And then we can also put it up with a real estate agent and put it up for sale. So there are still multiple options for this property.
Madam Mayor, may I add that if we were to end up in a position where we would go with the developer that wants to demolish it, would that agreement include a time frame in which they have to demolish?
We have not created an agreement as of yet in writing, but we are discussing that, and that time frame would be fairly immediate. So we're not there yet, Mr. Lewis, but that is what we would propose. And we, just so council knows, we would not bring something to council where we would be left holding the bag. Thank you.
Any other discussion tonight? Ms. Littman?
Yes, Mr. Lewis. I guess my question would be, would there be an advantage for us to begin exploring real estate listing agencies while we are waiting for something to happen? We don't have anything currently on, signed on or approved. So being ready to list the property, if these opportunities do not pan out, I would think we would want to do that fairly quickly. Could we be doing some research or getting contracts from agencies that might be interested in listing it for us in the meantime?
I think that's a great idea. I mean, Madam Mayor, would you be interested in starting to form those relationships now so that you're able to quickly transition?
We, Mrs. Littman, we actually have a couple entities that we could reach out to, and we would, be able to do that relatively quickly. But again, depending on if we want to work with these companies that are at hand, we're trying to do everything at the same time. And so, yes, we have those discussions. Yes, we do have real estate companies we can work with. that we did work with for the other properties we acquired, and we can get that marketed relatively quickly. Yes, yes, and I agree with all the comments you both made.
Thank
Still
you.
your floor, Ms. Lippman.
Okay, I have one more question. On the third entity that's interested that would be demolishing the hospital, is that a sale or is that a gift?
Madam Mayor?
I'm sorry, I hit the wrong button. Yes, that would be a very small amount that would be given to the city if that deal came to fruition. And of course, we would bring that to council to approve.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, I'm going to ask Mr. Hernkane, are you still with us?
Yes, thank you. I am. I got kicked out again. I think I stopped somewhere along Mrs. Lippman talking.
Okay, did you have any follow-up? Because when you were talking, it kind of started to get a little bit shaky for you. I just want to make sure you had your chance to speak.
I think I'm good. I guess I do have one more item if I can. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. A couple of weeks ago, I believe that I asked for an accounting record of the revenue and expenses to date on the hospital. I know in previous emails, the budget director, I have one dated May the 11th, where she gave the specific dollar amounts for the revenue and expenses. And I guess I believe that if we're able to at least show those dollar amounts, we should be able to show what is in there. I guess I would again ask, and if I didn't before and I just thought I did, I will formally ask if we can get a complete accounting record or a P&L statement on the hospital revenue and expenses to date, please.
Yes, I can provide that for you, Mr. Hernkane. I will send that out with the other information on the utilities and services and contracts.
Thank you very much.
And that will come to all of us, correct?
Yes.
Yes, yes, it will.
Thank you.
I want to thank everybody again for the conversation tonight about it. I know I can get quite passionate on this topic. It's probably because we've been dealing with it for a couple of years. And while not everything has gone as we had hoped, I still think it has gone as well as we could have hoped for, considering how this came about into existence, you know. And while I would hope for a excellent outcome at this point, I'm in agreement with you guys that cut the losses when you can and protect the city if that's what we come down to. So this will come up for third reading, and we'll all vote what we feel at that time. With that, I do not have any more business of finance, but Ms. Lippman, you did say you had a few loose ends you wanted to make sure we covered.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Lewis. The first being, I'm grabbing my folder over here. The first being our 23rd Street intersection. We'd had a prior conversation about the history of that area, where I had the engineer do an analysis of whether the area is with the number of accidents that it has had, whether it should be reconfigured. Ms. Sylvester was part of that as well, where she had been working with the engineer. It was determined based on the number of accidents that have occurred in the last 12 months that restriping and a new signal needed to be purchased. And I wanted to ask Barb, she had updated me on some of the progress of that intersection over the last week, and I thought if she wouldn't mind to update council on what we are able to do with that intersection and where funding now looks like it's able to come from. Barb, would you be able to update us?
Actually, we're going to be having a meeting tomorrow or Wednesday, myself and our engineers and Lori and Lee from our street department with, as I said, with our engineers. Again, you know, we want to be able to find the funding for this through our current budget, but I do need to get everybody on to that call. And Lee McBride was off last week, and today he had a lot to get caught up on. So we're going to be meeting together because, again, we want to make sure that we're looking at all of the accounts and the dollar amounts that are already in our current budget.
Okay, well, maybe Barb, if you wouldn't mind next week after your meeting, be able to just give us an update on that.
I sure will.
Okay.
I was definitely planning on it.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
The only other issue that was outstanding that I think I need more council guidance on is our designated outdoor refreshment area. Megan and I had a meeting with Mr. Bartos as well as some administrators previously, and we're able to get quite a bit of information both from Mr. Bartos as well as Lori Boron had a contact Mike Gill in Canton. So we have significant information on how we could implement this within our city. However, when discussed with the administration, both Barb and the mayor were very cautious on allocating funds for this purpose. And I'll just recap very quickly that expenses for signage would have to be absorbed by the city. Expenses for cups could be absorbed by the vendors. We'd also have to determine, if we're going to have perhaps Thursday through Saturdays and only certain times, whether a police officer would need to be part of the expenses that the city would need to incur. And then I'll also say trash receptacles. Those are the issues that are going to cost the city something. Now, we don't have exact figures on those items that the city is going to need to purchase. But when speaking with both Barb and administration, they're indicating timing may not be appropriate right now based on our situation with COVID and whether our revenue and expense generation is going to warrant dollars that council would want to allocate for that purpose. Now, I guess I don't agree with that. I think that based on the benefits that this DORA could have for our city, yes, there's going to be some cost involved with it. But I didn't want to go through all this research and additional meetings and Megan and I calling, several other individuals, companies, without having a direction from council. Is council interested enough in exploring this designated outdoor refreshment area to be willing to spend some money? Now, again, we don't have an idea on what that cost would be as of yet. I'm willing to do some more research. I've called pretty much every bar owner and restaurant in town, making sure that there's enough interest or participation, those that are willing to participate, and there is. They're even willing to coordinate a committee, and Mike Malinowski being one who is very adamant that this would benefit the city. He would be willing to maybe spearhead this type of a community action that would be, basically out of council's purview until additional research is done, costs and so forth are analyzed. But I don't want to, beat a dead horse here. I guess I'd like to get some indication. Are we interested enough to pursue this further, knowing we're going to have to buy receptacles, knowing we're going to have to pay a policeman during target times, knowing we're going to have to pay for signage? So I guess I just wanted to have some type of dialogue, even if it's a brief dialogue, even if it's let's think about it until next week. Megan and I do have a lot of research that we can share. Bill Bartos is certainly a wealth of knowledge. He was involved with putting the DORA application together for the city of Canton back in 2016. So I believe he could certainly do the same for us here. We've been also working with Dave Maley on a proposed area that we might want to consider. Of course, it would need to include those bars and restaurants that want to participate. And as I'd indicated previously, when Megan and I had met, is that BW3s certainly wants to be a part of that. That is on the west side. Paradigm wants to be a part of it on the north side. Overtime Bar and Grill on the east side, and maybe Tremont as our demographic area. But again, we can keep researching and researching till we're blue in the face, but if we don't have enough interest to know that these kind of expenses are going to be there, I didn't really know what direction to go further. When speaking with, I mean, my husband and I were just downtown on Saturday night, and it was booming. It was great. We have that little postal area there, and people were coming up to me saying, why can't we do this throughout the city? Why can't we have an area like Canton has, especially with the COVID-19 where no one wants to go inside? There might be 2 or 3 patrons inside, but everybody's looking for somewhere to go, somewhere to sit. People are waiting in line outside of their gates, waiting to be seated, to be able to order. Again, a lot said there, but I guess I was just looking for some type of guidance going forward.
Yeah, I will say from my end, I think it's great if maybe you and Ms. Sterrett would want to get together with some business owners that would be affected, and then key in the administration and put together the proposal. A couple businesses downtown that I've spoken to, they have creative ideas of even how to raise some money for it. So they might be able to help bring something that would, they were talking about getting a sponsor, see if one of the local distribution houses would want to sponsor it and things like that. So I think getting them involved will definitely make this more workable.
Yeah, there were many that I'd spoken with that were willing to even put their own money in to say, we'll go ahead and buy the cups for their establishment and be able to charge $1 extra for the cocktail to be able to walk around. Now, we certainly want to make sure that the issues that Canton had and that they told all of us that were involved with these meetings were the trash. We have to have enough receptacles. We have to have enough police, safety issues. And we want to make sure that we are not, having riots at 3 o'clock in the morning because we've allowed, that DORA to be open until bars close. That's not what we were looking at. We were looking at a finite time frame. We were looking at a shorter day, number of days. Like I said, maybe Thursday through Saturday. So, expense for safety would definitely be an issue. And I know when Barb and I had spoken earlier, that was her main concern as well, is that, we would have to be paying a policeman or numerous policemen to be, at least during those target times, to make sure that, our city is safe. How do we get the trash picked up? We don't want to litter our streets with, the cups and so forth. So receptacles are definitely an issue. And of course, the application requires to have signage at each one of our areas. So again, I guess I just wanted to make sure that this is something that, Megan and I can certainly go forward on, but we need to make sure that, we have a collaborated effort here with administration, with council, with the business owners. And I guess I didn't feel that as of yet.
Mr. Lombardi, you were trying to say something at some point, I believe.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Lewis. I believe that before we do anything that's going to cost the city one dime, we need to look into what our tax collections are going to look like this year. Again, with COVID, we don't know where we're going to end up for the year. I just don't think we should be looking at frivolous expenditures at this time. If they can get sponsors that'll take care of the costs, I don't see anything wrong with that. But I just don't think that the city right now needs to take on the burden.
Mr. Thayer.
Yeah, you mentioned, thank you, Mr. Lewis. You mentioned fairly broad and dispersed areas there. What would there be some sort of a communication, some sort of connection to all these? Because that's, I mean, we're talking 6-8 blocks or more. So I mean, you want to designate everything in between as a designated refreshment area, up and down, all the way up and down Lincoln Way, Tremont, was that Federal, where Paradigm is, and all the way up to Third, from Third to Third. It sounds like.
Well,
Tremont is Federal.
I'm sorry, I thought you were finished. Oh, that area was thought of because of the participants that were interested. Normally, I wouldn't say we should go down to BW3s, but BW3s wants to participate in this. They want to be a part of that. And we actually have to have participants, the bar owners, restaurants listed in our application. So that's why we made the numerous phone calls so that we could see who is interested in participating and who is not. So I went as far as BW3s because they're interested. Up north as far as Paradigm because they are interested in participating. The Buckeye Club, they want to participate. And I believe Dave, he had contacted over time Bar and Grill. And those are just on the outside of the perimeters. Anyone on the inside of that geographic area would be able to participate. They would just have to say, I'm now participating or would like to participate as part of this DORA, and they would be included in the application. So that's the reason that geographic area was chosen, and it was just based on those that want to be interested. Now that's not, I mean, we don't have to go out that far. It was just because of conversations I had had with those bar owners.
Ms. Sterrett?
Thank you. And just for clarification, Mr. Garrett, that's where the signage comes in, and that expense does come in because we have to have clear signage as to where DORA ends, where it begins. So when you're walking down the sidewalk, no beverages past this point. So we will have to make sure that we have enough signage to kind of outline where the DORA zone is. So that's going to be our upfront expense. Obviously, receptacles is another upfront expense. And then there will be a continuing expense that we have to consider for, there is a requirement for security down there and a plan for security. So we will have to have some type of designated officer. So, there are some expenses that have to be considered that the city is going to have to cover one way or the other. Maybe some of that can be donated by business owners, and maybe we should start, Linda, having maybe some type of meeting where we actually invite the business owners to a WebEx meeting or something along those lines and see, if they have any ideas how to raise funds for some of the upfront costs.
Well, I know that Mike Malinowski was very interested also in, and I'll say sort of leading this community business owner group. So I can certainly reach out to him and see if maybe he would open up his bar for us to meet there. He does the social distancing, so everything is within restriction also. But I think that maybe even the bar owners would be, or the restaurant owners would be willing to come personally and talk to all of us in regards to what might or might not be for our city. But again, I think this needs to be a collaboration. We can't go through all of this and, and have, well, Ms. Sylvester be concerned about, are we going to have any funds available for paying that policeman or those policemen for our safety services. So I guess I was just trying to open up dialogue a little bit based on conversations that we'd had previously, as well as, administration being on board with us to continue this dialogue.
If I could, one more thing, Mr. Lewis, just as a comment to Mr. Lombardi, we did kind of debate whether or not this was something that we were going to try to implement this year rather than next year. And I think the consensus for the most part was maybe see how finances went this year and see what kind of funding we have going into next year, because there will be some continuing costs to the city to do this. but those continuing costs may benefit the business owners in the downtown area in the long run. So those may be some continuing costs that the city wants to incur. But I think we do have to balance that with Mr. Lombardi and determine where our finances are going to be looking, over the next year or so with the COVID issues.
Mr. Henkin.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. I agree with Mr. Lombardi as well. I guess to Mrs. Littman, I would say I would suggest that you do look for sponsorships or funding through some of the businesses. I think you'd probably get it probably easier than you think. I think there would be those in the community that would support an endeavor like that. I just want to say that, we have heard over the last several months about the city's finances and whether we can pay police and fire at the end of the year. So I think you do have to take a hard look at, where we are from a money standpoint, because we can't tell some people there's no money and then there'd be money for others. I think that's hypocritical, and I don't think being fiscally responsible is selective. So I would suggest that you reach out to those in the community. I think you'll find what you're looking for the most part.
Well, those that I've spoken to thus far, certainly they are willing to sponsor the cups and so forth, but to sponsor signage, receptacles, and police safety services, that was not something that was proposed. So I don't know if you think that they may be willing to sponsor those types of services. I know that the businesses are looking at also, this is something that will help them now with COVID as well, where people don't want to go inside. So I guess I would say almost more sooner and later. Once we get comfortable with this, more sooner than later, I think would be advantageous. And I know when Megan and I talked before, it was maybe something at the end of the summer kind of thing, where we still can, have the advantages throughout the good weather before the end of the year would come, just as a trial. So I don't know. It would be a full application process, so there definitely would be probably months that would be required before this can be into place. So whether we can actually put it into place or not before the end of the year, maybe that's just wishful thinking. But it can certainly benefit the businesses. It doesn't benefit the city. City's going to have some expense to it, but it will definitely benefit these businesses. And Ted, even as you had, tried to help the businesses with the handout dollars, I guess what I look at this in is that give them the tools that they need to basically help themselves, where the restaurants are, the liquor control has allowed them to extend their parameters. And I believe that ends as of October 31st. So at that point, unless liquor control extends their permission, I guess, to allow liquor to be served beyond those initial parameters, then our postal court doesn't do us any good, because the city can approve that closing of that street. But if liquor control says they can only go outside their front door, then, that's a moot point. So I guess I was just looking at it. If there's enough interest that we can go forward, if with additional research, we're happy to do that. I don't know if Mr. Bartos even would be willing to join us in some of those meetings that we might be able to coordinate, or Paradigm might be able to coordinate, just to make sure that any questions are answered and that we are looking at every angle of this. So I don't know exactly how much it would cost, but I doubt that sponsors would be willing to pay for signage, receptacles, and police.
Well, it sounds like the clear consensus is go ahead and form this community group and get us some actual formalized numbers and ideas so that we can consider. I think you're on the right track, though. Definitely.
Okay. Mr. Lombardi has
Yes, thank you, Mr. Lewis, Mrs. Littman. I think what really your next step should be is to look at the costs involved for the signage, the receptacles, and the security, put that together in a spreadsheet, see what it's going to be like, and then present it to the business owners. There might be, they may be amicable to sharing those costs. But you have to give them, a solid, dollar amount. And I believe, you might even come back to this committee then and say, okay, well, we need X number of dollars, and the business owners are willing to spend, sponsor Y number of dollars. So now the city would only have to do Z number of dollars. And, it might not be that big of an expense as what you're thinking after business owners take on part of that share. I wouldn't count them out though.
Mr. Lewis,
Yes, Ms. Alter.
I just want to say that I don't think this is something that the city should sponsor. I'm against that very much. When we had the 4th of July picnic in the park for 20 some years, we raised all that money ourselves. The city did not participate in any way. There are ways you can raise money to do things like this, and if we would put our money into the downtown for this Dora, then where does that leave all of the other bars and restaurants all over town? I mean, I think you're opening a can of worms, and I think you really need to think about this. If the business owners want it, then the business owners can get together and plan it. I also had a store downtown, the Merchants Association. We had all kinds of activities. The city never participated. I could go on, but I won't waste your time. But I'm definitely against the city getting sponsors to do anything of this nature. Thank you.
Hernkane?
Mr. Lewis, I got two things here. You also have Downtown Massillon Association and Massillon Main Street, which are two downtown focused groups. I think in a conversation with them on any maybe resources they have or ways you can incorporate them into something like this would be beneficial. And the second is, if my memory is correct, and if it's not, somebody please say so, but when we would have the downtown Cruise On In or the car show, didn't Ray Jeske, ESPN 990, or whoever put that on pay for the police for that day? Am I wrong there? Does anybody remember that, or am I just thinking that?
I believe the Cruise On In raised their own money for all services needed.
So then they reimburse the city for the police staff time, is my recollection. Then I don't.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Well, I think this is a good conversation. I mean, Linda, do you think you need more information, or can we go ahead and move on?
Oh, no, I guess I would just ask Megan, would she be willing to continue to work with me? And we can contact Mike Malinowski about getting that meeting with the business owners planned, and perhaps Mr. Bartos, who has the most experience with this type of thing, to be able to discuss in that meeting, to answer questions.
Absolutely, Linda. I think that's a good idea. And like Mr. Hernkane said, there may be more business owners that are willing to sponsor some of these things, that we need to reach out to them and see if they have that interest. And that could help with some of the upfront costs.
Mm-hmm. Could we ask either Barb or the mayor for any comments that they might have? They shared a few with me previously. That's why I wanted to make sure that they had an opportunity to be heard also.
Madam Mayor or Ms. Sylvester?
Hi, everyone. We did have a conference call with Mrs. Littman, and it's not that we're against this project. It's just the timing of it. There's so many unknowns financially within the city with COVID this year. And so that, if we had a budget that we could look at and try to determine and price out what it's going to cost the city in the future, that is exactly what the Imagine Downtown Massillon project was all about, is bringing people downtown. And I know the Dora and a downtown redevelopment district that David Maley's working on, those are the two things that, we had on the agenda. But we are skittish to go forward this year because there are, again, so many unknowns financially that we don't want to put the cart before the horse and it does take time to apply and to get accepted, and even to fill out the application. I know Mr. Bartos told us that there were several people in the city of Canton working on the application at the same time. So I think that there is going to be an opportunity, if we do go forward with this, that we do have to gather information, prepare the application, and then submit it. But I would feel more comfortable if we are waiting on our finances, and then 2021 is projected to be even tighter than this year. And so we're just concerned about finances, and we want to be prudent with our taxpayer dollars.
Well, thank you. I guess at this time, we're opening up for citizen discussion. Does anybody have objection to that? All right. If we have any citizens of the city of Massillon that are listening in to this meeting this evening, and you would like to speak to a matter before council, now is your opportunity. Please state your name and address, and please attempt to limit your discussion to 3 minutes. I'm not seeing or hearing from anyone. All right, with that said, I'll see you guys all next week. Thank you so much. Meeting is over.
Good night.